90.3 WHPC now presents Law You Should Know. The law affects every aspect of our lives, our home, our jobs, and our recreational activities. Now, learn about the law and how to protect yourself against the loss of your liberty or property, and learn how to stand up for your rights and seek compensation when you have been wronged. Your host for Law You Should Know is attorney Kenneth J. Landau, a past dean of the Nassau Academy of Law, and frequently lectures to lawyers on ethics and avoiding problems with clients, and to the public on how to choose and use lawyers. This is Law You Should Know on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hi, this is Ken Landau, and welcome to Law You Should Know. Today, our guest is Catherine Turner. She's the author of Create a Legacy of Love, Everything Your Loved Ones Need to Know When You Can No Longer Tell Them. And she's going to guide us through information that we should live, provide for our loved ones while we're alive to do it, so they'll know it at the appropriate time. Catherine, welcome to Law You Should Know.
Thank you, Ken. Thanks for having me here.
What prompted you to write this book?
Well, it may not be what you think. I woke up one night from a dream that was as clear as it could be, that felt to me like an assignment from God, if you will. And it was something I couldn't let go of. It felt like it was an assignment. He said, write this book. It needs to be done. People need this book in their hands. And while I was in an almost impossible position to sit down and do that while running a business and raising a couple kids and homeschooling and a whole bunch of other stuff, I managed to do it over a 7-year period of time.
Okay. I do think it's an important topic and can prevent hardships to families and ill will among family members. And it also enables a person to let their plans and their wills and their desires be known and provide necessary information so that it makes it easier for their loved ones.
Absolutely. It's everything that's, and I say everything, but of course there's always more things. But it'll make you think about a lot of things that you aren't already. It's all the things that are not in a last will and testament, and those very important legal documents that they should be paying attention to first and foremost.
Oh, and I think that's a point well made. And this is information that will make it easier for your family to carry on, and will supplement whatever might be in a last will and testament, which is a topic for another show, and people should make sure they have one that reflects their current wishes. So the first step is it for some people to have a conversation about death, although it may not be imminent, with their family members or with their parents?
Absolutely. Death can happen in an instant, and that happens all the time. And, it is the worst possible situation we can be in when a loved one dies suddenly. And grieving is as much as we can handle emotionally. And what happens is when there's all these questions and decisions and we're battered with them at this highly charged time emotionally, sometimes families can become fractured because siblings aren't agreeing on how things should be done. And as I was researching my book, man, those stories were very, very prevalent. We all seem to know somebody who's gone through hardships in a family because of this very thing.
And your book and your words of wisdom are to prevent hardships and to prevent ill will among family members. That's
my biggest message, is that this is the most loving thing you can do, in fact, is to be prepared.
And maybe there's some helpful information. Maybe there are wrongs that someone can make right, whether it's a sibling, a child, or a parent. It's just really, you're trying to gather information and provide information about what you would want to happen.
Yes. So the book covers everything from, basic things like where are my documents or where is the hidden treasure to, really an opportunity to write your own eulogy, even, final words. It's an opportunity.
And also to describe the funeral arrangements you would like, or what the tombstone should say, or
yes.
what you'd like to happen after your passing.
Yes.
Who you'd like to know or not know about it.
Yes, it's an opportunity to convey all those final wishes so that there's a much higher likelihood that they're going to come to fruition.
Exactly. And there'll be a discussion, a discussion of give and take that you can express these concerns and maybe others to your family.
Oh, for sure. Yes. One of the hardest steps is to take that initial conversation. That conversation as an adult child of an aging parent, this is a critical step to take this to an aging parent and say, Mom, there's some things I've been thinking about, and I'm wondering if we can talk some of these things through.
And there might be emotional issues, there might be economic issues, but there also might be probate issues about whether you have a will, whether it's accurate, whether you should have a trust instead of a will, whether you need other documents like a healthcare proxy or a living will, because once you're not competent or once you've passed on, it's too late to execute those documents.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
And what kind of conversation should there be about a locked box or a safe deposit box or where the important papers are?
Well, I think that's the easiest thing I think the easiest first step you can take is get a lockbox or a safe and let that, let at least one trusted person know the code or give them a key and say, this is where my documents are going to be. This is where everything you're going to need to know. If something should happen to me, this is where you can easily access all my records.
And you may want to give a trusted family member or family attorney or accountant that information as well, or information on where it is kept, just so the relative can go to them.
Yes, absolutely. Sometimes the lawyer is the most trusted person in your life.
Or it might be an accountant. It might be some relative of yours or
correct.
A neighbor.
Yes.
Someone else.
Yes.
And some important things for you to decide, perhaps outside a will, or who should get each of your personal treasures.
Well, I've heard so many stories. Honestly, this is probably the most common story I would hear. In fact, I have a friend who has 3 sisters, and when their mom died, she wasn't a wealthy woman. She had left behind a lot of mostly costume jewelry, but those 3 sisters couldn't agree upon who got what. And I'll tell you, that was years and years ago, and those 3 sisters still don't talk to each other because there was so much animosity around. And that's a very typical common thing.
And I think that's a very common situation. So to prevent that, do you have a discussion about which pieces of jewelry mean the most to your children or relatives? And then if both of them have the same answers, if you see if there's another piece of jewelry that will work as well?
Yes, you absolutely have those discussions, and then record all these things in my my workbook and my guide, Create a Legacy of Love. This is set up such that you can fill in all the blanks of who gets what. And
so your book will take them through all these different issues.
It will take them through all the process. Enable
them a way to provide answers.
Yes.
What about the role of charity? If you want to leave some money to a neighbor, someone who was helpful to you, or a church, or something else, is that something you should be discussing with your family as well?
You should discuss it with your family. More importantly, really think those things through as far as, depending on how wealthy you are, you may not want to leave too much money in some of your heirs' hands. That's something to think about, in which case you may want to set up a life insurance policy that gives money to a charity that you can use some of your money to pay the premiums on. But in the end, you've got to really think through who you're giving what to, and is it in their best interest?
Well, you can set up a trust or some device so that they're not in control of their money, that a trustee, maybe a different relative, maybe a different parent, would be in trust and give it to them at certain periods or for certain events.
Yes, however you want to set it up. And that's all a legal issue but the book just touches upon it because it is something to really think through.
And your book also includes sections so you can, have the different documentation there and information on your assets as well.
Yes, listing your trusted advisors, giving, it's the reason why you want to put it in a secure place, because I'm also suggesting in the book that, have a password manager program, but if, feel like you can trust putting those passwords in the book, even so someone can easily access, your digital estate.
Yes, and that may be important because otherwise it may be very hard to have access to the digital estate. I'd just like to remind our listeners that we're talking to Catherine Turner, and she is the author of Create a Legacy of Love, Everything Your Loved Ones Need to Know When You Can No Longer Tell Them. It's a book and it's a checklist about explaining your wishes and providing the documents, making them ready available to your family, and going through these steps to prevent any fights and making sure that your wishes are carried out. And again, so you create a harmony in doing so and not conflict.
Correct.
And have you found that there is that estates or wills or the gifts that a family parents make can create a lot of conflict?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've all seen that happen. I've heard a lot of different stories. There's even been $900 bank accounts that have been left behind where the family members couldn't decide how it should be used, and families have broken up and never spoken to each other again. It's just the more you can put on paper, whether legally or just in your handwriting, the less conflict you're likely to leave behind with family members to grapple with.
And some people, again, you should speak to an attorney or your financial advisor about it. Sometimes people will leave insurance policies or bank accounts with similar amounts in trust for different people, so it will pass to them directly that way. It may be harder, as you said, to not do that or leave it to one person and expect them to share it with others. It's important to speak to your financial advisor or attorney to see what options you have for your wishes being carried out when you're no longer there to handle them yourselves. I think you said in your book you also want to make sure you provide a section to provide information on which loved ones or that you want notified.
Yeah, there's a section that this came about because I had a good friend who, when her dad was dying, it was really clear to him that there was certain people he did not want at his side while he was in the dying process, and it was tricky. So it's just as important to know who you want present while you're dying as who you don't. And the other thing is make a list of people you want to make sure are notified. There may be people that, leave a name and numbers and emails of people you want to have them notified. So, a lot of these elderly people, they're not necessarily on Facebook. And so it might take some time for them to find out that someone close to them has died. We want to make sure that, we want those friends of ours and loved ones to attend our celebration of life or our funeral.
And in terms of the family legacy or archives, I mean, if there's old photos or family possessions or even jewelry, maybe you want to help them provide information about those photos while you still have a very good source.
Yeah.
Or compile that family tree.
Well, you know what I think is also a good idea, Ken, is we have an opportunity to really set things up the way we want them. We could design our own funeral card, and we could, here's the picture I want printed on it. Here's the pictures I want in a slideshow. Here's a voice recording of me that could be dubbed over the slideshow. We have the opportunity to make this exactly the way we want it, including our funeral song. Maybe this is a female thing, but all my girlfriends and I have a funeral song. It's like we know each other's songs that we want to be left with as in our memories. Music is such an amazing way of staying in our hearts, so I think everyone should have a funeral song, that one song
and
that speaks.
You may not be there, but you can have it your way.
Yes, you absolutely can have it your way.
And what about your obituary or eulogy? I mean, should you name, maybe suggest some people you would like to, share their remembrances, or some...
Yes.
Write
in
something
fact,
yourself that will be shared?
Ask them ahead of time, will you do this for me at my funeral or my celebration of life? And here's another thing. In my book, I do have a chapter that is dedicated to a lot of questions. They're very personal questions that you can pick and choose from. But if you fill out those questions, those are it's an amazing final opportunity for final words that you can impart upon your loved ones. And not only do I suggest that you fill those out so someone else could write your eulogy easily with your words of wisdom, but I suggest with our digital tools that we have available to us that you write your own eulogy, write your own obituary.
Well, you also might want to write private letters to your relatives, positive letters, maybe
Absolutely.
What they've meant to you, how they've inspired you, that you appreciated the care and concern, and that you wish them well, or you have confidence in them, or you hope they'll achieve their dreams.
Yes.
Your last letter to them. Yes,
especially children and grandchildren, letting them know what they really meant to you.
And it's good for people to do that while you're alive too. And maybe as you're thinking about the final letter, maybe it's good to write a letter now, send a little card of appreciation because I think people need a little bit more of that with COVID and in the tough world we live in.
Oh, you're absolutely.
It's good to write a card or a letter, put your thoughts down now. It might inspire someone or create hope.
Yes, I agree with you completely. Yes, do it now.
Well, write a letter and send it now, and maybe have one for later too.
Yes. There's never too much.
It could be a card. It could be something besides a typical email or something, because a card or a letter is something they can hold on to and have with them.
And it's a lost art too, so it's going to get noticed.
And what about their family medical history? That might be a more touchy subject, but what information about the family medical history, and how should it be conveyed? Something kind of curious about humans is we don't have any sort of medical record that seems to follow us. Like, we don't necessarily have records of how our ancestors died. We might know how grandma or great grandma died. But some of those things really get lost from generation to generation. And it's not just how they died, but what, medical issues might they have had, because for instance, my best girlfriend has osteoporosis, and it's a very genetic condition. She knows that her mother's, she now knows, they didn't know this at the time, but she now knows that her mother's osteoporosis was a direct result of an issue that she had with her heart. Well, now that my friend of my generation knows this, she can do something to stop it. She needs to impart that wisdom onto her children and her grandchildren, just in case it never comes up in
conversation, but even if it does, those are things that can get lost in conversation.
So for something that's hereditary, and there, of course, now there are genetic tests, and it's a whole new world. And but just in case it's something hereditary, that whether it can be prevented or minimized or postponed,
yes,
perhaps that information should be contained in the book, the guidebook.
Yes, there's a couple pages. Just write down the medical history that you know of in all of your family. You know, did your aunt have breast cancer? Because that's very genetic. Did somebody in the family have diabetes? Because these are things then that we can do better preventative care for ourselves and then pass that down to the generations below us as well. Very important information.
Or even have earlier monitoring if we know it's in our family
Correct.
history. And maybe we can do things to prevent it or postpone it.
Yes.
What are some other issues that should be dealt with? I just want to remind our listeners, we're talking with Catherine Turner, and she is the author of Create a Legacy of Love, Everything Your Loved Ones Need to Know When You Can No Longer Tell Them. And we've talked about many things that might be part of an estate, how you can give information and leave personal property or photos, but we're talking about giving them a guide and medical information for the future, which can be very important. And in the book, you also cover end-of-life care, where a person should give their philosophy and their wishes.
Well, here's the thing about end-of-life care. Life is pleasant. Death is peaceful. It's the transition that's troublesome. There's a good percentage of us that are going to know when approximately we're going to die. There's a decent percentage. So in that event, you need a living will, you need a medical power of attorney, you need those documents legally, but you also have an opportunity here to express your wishes on a more detailed level. For instance, so this is a personal story, and it was when my mother died. She had stage 4 lung cancer, so we all knew she was dying. And my dad was very insistent that we kept her at home as long as possible. That we keep her at home. That was just his old school way of thinking. And I'll tell you that without going into great detail about that, it became very daunting for us to be there to help her. She had great needs. And I know my mother, she would not have wanted us to be burdened by that. And there's a lot of indignities that come with that dying process. Once I convinced my dad that it was time to take her to hospice, the relief on all the family members was significant. And I know that my mother also would have wanted her to be cared for by someone who that was their job, that was their profession, that was what they specialized in. Mom would not have wanted anybody to be saddled the way that we were. So it's something to think about. Do I really want us? I
guess it's important to express wishes about it,
yes,
as long as it's medically feasible, financially feasible. But there may come a time when it's not, and then it may be time to find a different setting that works for the concerned.
But as long as you're expressing your wishes and your desires around that, because you may be incapacitated, like my mom was, where she can't really tell us what she wants. And in that case, again, just write down what it is that you want.
And sometimes there are documents as, a healthcare proxy or a living will that may cover those areas. But it's important to give more detailed instructions so you're not a burden, and the family can accommodate you as best they can. And what about the digital estate? You mentioned it earlier. What do you recommend concerning that?
Well, if you're not a lawyer or a financial planner and you haven't heard of the term digital estate, you're not alone.
Well, essentially, so tell us exactly what it is.
Okay, it refers to the electronic information assets that exist on the internet and on devices. So it includes everything from digital music and social media accounts, online files, virtual currency like Bitcoin, and even assets you've accumulated in video games. I mean, believe it or not, a man sold his virtual nightclub inside a video game for $635,000.
I think the bottom line is you're going to have trouble having access to those platforms if the person becomes incompetent or is deceased. So what do you recommend as a way to prevent those hardships?
Well, there's two primary options currently available to help your loved ones manage those assets. And one is to transfer digital assets back to tangible items that can be physically transferred, such as, music files can be burned to CDs. The records in email or online databases that have value could be printed or saved to a physical storage device like a USB drive that can be opened by the person to whom you wish to transfer them. But at least record usernames and passwords and security question responses even. And there's all places for this within my book. Store it in a highly secure location again, and do periodic updating.
But it's good to make sure that information is available so someone can take care of those things.
Absolutely. A lot of us have auto payments coming out that if we don't even know those are happening, there could be.
So in your book, we just have a moment left. In your book, do you provide a section for financial obligations? Mortgages, loans,
yes,
things along that
all
line,
of that.
credit cards. Okay.
Yep.
So those have to be dealt with as well as
yep.
assets,
yes.
refunds the person may be entitled to. I would like to thank our guest, Catherine Turner. Just give us your website again. So we can go.
The website is legacyoflovebook.com.
And people can also order the book from your website?
Yes, they sure can. Absolutely.
And you have some free information available about these topics.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I would like to thank our guest, Catherine Turner. As you've heard, has written a most interesting book, and it's a helpful guidebook where you can actually store these documents and this related information. And if you missed any portion of this program or you want to tell someone about it, the podcast is available at nccradio.org, along with many other podcasts of law and business topics. And please join us next week at the same time on 90.3 FM WHPC Radio for another program on Law You Should Know.